Funding for the Motley Fool money-making, life-changing special was made possible by
EMC Corporation, committed to leading the way in building the information infrastructure for a connected world. EMC, where information lives.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Once upon a time, there were two boys, David and Tom Gardner. They were lucky because they had a dad who taught them all about money, investing, and the stock market. As David and Tom grew older, they started to teach others what they'd learned. And they revealed a secret Wall Street is reluctant to share. Investing is easier than it seems. Which is why several years ago, they founded the Motley Fool to help people achieve financial independence. Now it's one of the most popular places on the internet. They've also reached out through several New York Times best-selling books and their own weekly national radio show. And now, the Motley Fool money-making, life-changing special with hosts David and Tom Gardner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you.
Welcome to the Motley Fool money-making, life-changing special. I'm David Gardner.
And I'm Tom Gardner. We're the Motley Fools. We take our name from Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote of fools. The fool was the only character in the Elizabethan court who could actually tell the king and queen the truth without fear of losing his head. We're going to try and tell you some truths tonight about your finances that you may not have heard, because so few of us got any education about the subject of money in high school or in college, and most of us approach the financial subject with some fear. Hopefully we can introduce a little bit of education, amusement, and enrichment, have a little fun, and take that fear out of it.
That's right, Tom. We take the long view as well. I want to introduce that ground rule right now. No short-term thinking, no short-term investing allowed. The Motley Fool preaches taking the long view, not getting rich quick. We don't actually think most people who try to get rich quick ever truly succeed. The right way to get rich is over time on your road to financial independence. And what does financial independence mean? It means being able to do whatever you want to do in your life. So if at any point you feel that we are not educating, amusing, and enriching you, the crowd, and you at home on our route to financial independence, I promise I will personally fire my brother. Thank you.
Wow.
I promise.
Who's clapping? Wow. Let me tell you, I didn't know my job was at risk tonight, so let's get our caps off and get to work, Dave.
Sure, Tom. You know, we've actually hired a very expensive supermodel to do this tonight, Tom, because it's a high-budget show. Thank you, Amy. By the way, Tom, nice nest egg.
Thank you, Dave.
Up top.
I'm happy to have it, and I'm happy to have Team Nest Egg here with me. They're right out here, the Nest Eggers. You guys look great. You guys look great. Yeah. Okay, that's my team.
Your guys, Tom. Your guys.
They're here. Okay, now none of us, even we bald guys, very few of us actually got any education about this subject in school. Fortunately for David and I, we had a father who sat us down at a young age and said, I'm going to teach you all 3 lessons about your money. And Dad said to us, first of all, a really simple, rudimentary, almost offensively easy idea. Don't spend more than you have, guys. That was number 1.
Number 2 was use your savings to invest them in the stock market. Now, Dad was no expert. He was a lawyer. And Tom and I are no experts. We have no degree in the stock market. There is no school in our country that teaches the stock market. We're liberal arts majors, and we learn by listening, by reading, and by doing. And so all of those are things that are available to you. Listening, reading, and doing.
Dave, we're also experienced consumers. Many people who encounter the stock market and investing in their money for the first time and really think about making those investments think, I don't know anything about this subject. But the fact of the matter is, in America, of all countries, we're pretty darn experienced consumers, and we can look around us and learn some lessons from the companies that we buy from.
Yeah, and for us, it was Dad taking us into the grocery store and saying, hey, kids, look, chocolate pudding. We own that company, Norton Simon. They make the chocolate pudding. Let's go get more chocolate pudding. Which made him a very popular dad with us. But what he was doing is he was connecting for us the insights that we had as consumers, the things that we love, the products and services, with an opportunity to become a part owner of the company that offers those things. That's the miracle of the stock market. That's what he was connecting for us.
Now, most of us, before we can start investing, need to actually get out of debt first. And we know some forms of debt are actually fine. A mortgage, student loans carry low interest rates, and they're actually borrowings that are investments in our future. But there's a slew of American debt, unfortunately, that's actually credit card debt with very high interest rates. The average American today, shockingly, has $5,800 of credit card debt at 18% interest rates. And darn it, we should be able to get out of that, because when we pay $5,000 in credit card debt, we pay $1,000 of interest each year to get absolutely nothing.
Actually, that's not true, Tom. You do get a free Aspen ski vacation for your credit card banker.
Okay, that's true. So you
I
can
had
feel
to
good
correct
about
you there.
that.
Yeah, it feels really good, doesn't it? But what a shocking statistic it is. And let's take $1,000 of credit card debt. And you know how long it takes if you just make the minimum monthly payment to pay that off? I'll let you guess, Tom.
I feel a quiz coming here.
Yeah.
Let's see, $1,000.
$1,000 minimum monthly payments.
18%. I'll say 3 months to knock that off.
You can take another shot, Tom. I don't
Okay.
think you'll ever guess.
Okay,
Have you ever been in debt? Apparently not.
I'm actually going to go with 19 years, Dave.
Exactly. It's almost as if he'd known the answer.
I feel good. You can bring your quizzes my way all night. Bring 'em.
It takes you 19 years to get out of debt if you're just making that minimum monthly payment on $1,000. So we really believe that instead of investing in those credit card companies and building up their skyscrapers, why not invest in yourself? And Tom, that's one of our big messages tonight. Play the game differently. Invest in yourself.
And Dave, actually, we want to give some specific tips for people who are in credit card debt. We think we can help you. But the first one is just resolve. Actually being resolved to pay down that credit card debt. Most people don't realize how painful it is. You cannot start investing toward your financial independence if you have 18% interest rates on your debt. Now, a story came through to our site 2 years ago from a guy named Chico Martin, and we've got a photo of Chico. And Chico actually wrote us and said, guys, I want to tell you about my life and my fight for financial independence. It all started when I was born in Alabama as a sharecropper on a cotton farm to a family that was really living a subsistence life. And at the age of 18, I went out and joined the military. And for the next 15 years, as I traveled around with the military, I actually never had to pay any of my own expenses. The Army did it for me. So it wasn't until I got to the age of about 35 that I actually had a job and I had to figure out what to do with money. That was also the first time that I started getting unsolicited offers from credit card companies in the mail. And unfortunately, I accepted 8 of them over the years, and I ran up $57,000 of credit card debt. Now, even more shocking to me, upon reflection, is that I've had a wonderfully successful professional career. I'm a manager in the finance department at a public telephone company, and yet here I am with this credit card debt, and I haven't knocked it out. Chico stumbled upon the Motley Fool website and actually resolved to pay it down. He took every single dollar he could, and over the next 2 years, he actually paid down $60,000 of credit card debt and started an investment account of $10,000. The first step is just to get resolved, to recognize that that's actually the very worst form of debt that exists out there, and that's the form you need to pay down before you can ever start investing.
And Tom, that's why our first money-making, life-changing point tonight on your road to financial independence is?
Pay down double-digit debt. It's okay to have interest rates on debt that run 9, 8, 7, 6, 5%. But once you're above 10%, you actually have to commit to paying that down first. And it's not as difficult as it sounds, and I think we have a couple good tips.
Well, Tom, right now, I'm feeling a little bit momentum. I like the name of our show, The Motley Fool Money-Making Life, and we have these moments baked into the show. I feel like we're all on a big train right now, just chugging forward. You remember that song, Train of Fools? Remember that? Train, train,
Dave.
Train of Fools.
Dave, it's Chain of Fools. Yeah. That's pretty embarrassing. We're on television here,
Chain
Dave.
of Fools.
That's Chain of Fools. Chain of Fools.
Well, hey, it's our show, and so it's a train of fools on this show.
Okay.
It's a train of fools, and we're all going forward.
Okay, I'll give you applause on that.
Thank you. And so we're on our next step, and let's talk about how to get out of debt, because it's one thing to point it out, it's an entirely another thing to get out of it altogether. And Tom, we got an email a few weeks ago from a guy named Stuart Rushfield. Let me tell you about Stuart Rushfield. Stuart and his wife, over the course of their early lives together, racked up $84,000 of debt. We're talking about $38K on the credit card, 8 of them, 2 cars at $14,000 each in loans, 2 separate brand new cars, and $18,000 in student loans as well. And Tom, faced with that situation, they realized with a child coming that they had to take steps. So the first thing they did is the first thing everyone should do in that situation, and it is this. Don't use the credit cards anymore. Just use cash. If you've got 8 cards, maybe you save 1 for convenience. It's helpful to have plastic, but cut up the other 7 if you need to, and don't use them at all. And that's the first thing that Stu did. The second thing that he did is he decided, you know, honey, if we're going to actually get out of this situation, we have to change our mentality. For now on, we only spend based on need, not on want. And the third thing that they did is they lined up those credit cards just before cutting them up by highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, and they took them one at a time. This is the one to attack, right out here, the highest one, not the one with the biggest balance. Whatever you're paying the highest interest rate on, That's the one to go after first, and it's a snowball effect. And Stu told us that his second greatest achievement of his life was getting out of that debt. He's gone from minus $84,000 in the hole to just a few $1,000s today, Tom. And by the end of the year, they'll have that paid off. The greatest achievement of his life is, of course, the little fella up there.
Now, Dave, a great fourth tip that we have for anyone in credit card debt. Here's the dirty secret of the credit card industry. Those interest rates on your cards are actually negotiable. They are very negotiable. Credit card companies pay a lot of money to get your business and my business, and they don't want to lose that. So we just give them a phone call and negotiate the rate. And Dave, I actually think now is a perfect time to call up my credit card provider.
Okay, great.
Just give them a buzz on the phone and see if maybe I can't get my rate down here. So,
First Federal.
Hi, my account number is 462-3747.
Hello, Mr. Gardner.
Hi. Look, I'm looking at my credit card bill for the last month, and I've really enjoyed doing business with you guys over the years, but I'm seeing that my interest rate is 17.5%. That seems awfully high given all of the unsolicited mailings I'm getting from other credit card companies in my mailbox each day. I'm wondering if you can get that rate down to, say, 10, maybe 11%.
Mr. Gardner, let me check with my supervisor.
Okay.
He figured it out. Mr. Gardner, we would be happy to drop the rate to 11.5% if you think you could pay that off.
That sounds great. For starters, thanks for the opportunity to get that rate down and continue working with you guys.
Okay. Now, Tom, my question for you is, as we conclude that, does that actually work? I mean,
that actually
is it
works,
that easy?
Dave. It's just that easy. Most of the credit card companies, they're not going to advertise this at you, I promise. But those rates can be negotiated down, and if you can get your rate down from 13% to 11% or 15% to 10%, that can actually save you months or years of paying down that credit card debt. That's a great fourth step for anyone who's looking at credit card debt. Dave, I'm going to introduce a dreaded, dastardly, depressing concept of budgeting.
Ooh.
If we actually saw where we were spending our money on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis, we might frankly be shocked. I'm not actually going to ask you tonight to commit to doing a budget for the next 3 years of all of your spending. What I am going to do is ask you to track for a 4-week period every single dollar, quarter, nickel, dime, or penny that you spend, just for 4 weeks with Quicken or Microsoft Money, and just see where you're spending your money, because I think you'll frankly be shocked about some of the expenditures. I sat down with a friend of mine about a month ago, and we went through her budget, and she was particularly shocked to realize that she was buying 2 cups of flavored coffee every day. And those cups of coffee were costing her $8.50 a day. Now, when we actually begin to annualize that, we really get shocked. It's $250 a month. It's $3,000 a year on coffee. Now, she's 28 years old, so I sat down with her and I said, you know, the stock market doubles on average every 6.5 years. If you were to put that $3,000 of coffee money into the stock market this year and next year and every year for the rest of your life, at the age of 65 when you retired, you'd have more than $1.5 million in your retirement plan. And that's coffee. That's just one line item. And we'll work through the rest of your budget in a sec, but we'll start there.
Speaking of working through a budget, Tom, let me ask you, have you ever actually tracked your own expenses?
Well, Dave, you're trying to put me on the spot, but I'm right there for you because I did it the last 4 weeks, and I'm willing to share my personal life here with America.
Okay, let's take a glimpse at Tom's monthly expenses.
You see, I've got my rent, I've got utilities, groceries, my phone, and...
I need to stop you there, thoe, for a sec,
Well,
Tom,
we've gone through it, Dave,
Well, you skipped over one thing there. $650 eating out?
I thought she might be the one. Thank you. Thanks.
You know, a lot of people may not realize that Tom was actually on People Magazine's 100 Most Eligible Bachelors in their last issue. And given that, Tom, I wouldn't think you'd have to spend like that to attract.
Wow, that hurts, Dave. I have to say I'm disappointed in myself also, and I'm making the commitment tonight with all of you here to not spend that money in the months ahead, because you annualize that $650, and that's nearly $8,000 a year on eating out. Frankly, what's shocking is if we all sat down, maybe you all aren't as desperate as I am, but you're probably spending too much money eating out as well. A lot of people go out and buy lunch at work or pick up fast food on the way home, and most of that costs too much money. And if you can cut out just $1,000 or $500 of your spending on eating out each year, you're going to find great opportunities to put that in savings and to start investing.
Tom, I'm feeling another Motley Fool money-making, life-changing point coming on here, but rather than do it ourselves, why don't we turn it over to Ben Stein of Win Ben Stein's Money on Comedy Central, the great TV personality who had this to say recently on our radio show.
I have a great investment tip for everybody listening, which is it's incredibly wonderful to have capital and savings. And the feeling of peace and security you get from having savings in the stock market and in the bond market, and knowing that if your boss fires you or if your ratings tank and they cancel your show, you can still pay your mortgage, is incredible. And no stereo, no car, no vacation is as great as having that money in the bank and knowing it's there to take care of you.
And that was beautifully put. So our Motley Fool money-making, life-changing point boiled down to financial independence is priceless.
Now, I want to make something very clear here. We've talked a lot about debt and savings, putting that budget together, finding where you're spending your money. We're not here tonight to say, don't spend any of your money. Don't go on vacations. Stop buying anything.
We're not saying that.
We're not saying that. We're just saying, let's learn to live within our means. Let's actually put a little bit of our savings away. And Dave, that's our next Motley Fool money-making, life-changing point of the evening, and that is, you know what? Let's try to save 5 to 10% of our annual salary. That's a great goal for most of us.
That's right, Tom. Establishing a regular rhythm of savings in your life is essential.
And here's our slightly emotional point, and that is we suggest that you sit down and write 2 or 3 things down that we want to do somewhere in our future, some dream that we have. And I think if you look at those dreams, you're going to realize that on some level they have to be financed. You need some money to take a year off from work and travel around the world, or to send your kids to college, or to look your boss or your colleague at work if you don't enjoy your job and say, Dave, I'm not working with you anymore. This is the last night I'll be working with you if I could afford it. But I can't afford it, so I'll be working with you for the next 40 years, Dave. Get comfortable.
But Tom, you love your brother, and I'm so on you.
I published a book, Younger Brothers Who Love Their Older Brothers Too Much. And I hope you read it.
No comment.
Well, now you're ready to invest. If you started saving, you've put a little bit of your annual budget away, maybe every other week when you get your check, put 5% away into a 401k or IRA. And you're starting to invest for your financial independence. And the beauty of it is that you have a really powerful force behind you that unfortunately a lot of the day traders and a lot of people looking at the stock market and worrying about where it's going or where it's been over the last 3 months, those people are missing out on the most powerful force behind us. And it's an equation that Albert Einstein said was the most miraculous formula that he encountered in his entire life. It wasn't the theory of relativity, it was simply the power of compounding. And we actually look at compounding and what it does to our money. You start to see exponential growth work some miracles in your savings and investment account. The stock market on average over the last century has doubled in value every 6.5 years on average. Now that might not excite the new investor who's looking at their portfolio of $1,000 and saying, okay, in 6.5 years, I'll have $2,000.
That's not bad.
It's not bad, but it may not fire people up to become investors today. But if they actually put that money in for long periods of time, I think they're going to be very surprised about what happens. If they were to invest that money for 54 years, which I know seems somewhat outrageous, it would be up on average 256 times. They'd have over $250,000. And that's the story of Coca-Cola investors this century. Coca-Cola in the 20th century was really the greatest company in America. And that company's gone up in value since its IPO a tremendous amount. If you had invested, or your grandparents or great-grandparents had invested $1,000 in Coca-Cola in 1919, 20 years later it might not have been that much money. But 80 years later, at the turn of the century, that $1,000 is worth more than $100 million after taxes. Now that's the power of compounding, and that's why Dave and I are angry at our great-grandparents.
That's all we're really talking about when we talk about the power of compounded returns, that miraculous power, as Einstein put it. And I want to tell you about a woman who actually put that power into play in her own life. You may have read the story of Ann Scheiber in Time magazine. It's a wonderful story. In 1944, Ann Scheiber retired from her job at the Internal Revenue Service. She had not enjoyed it very much. She had never been promoted. And so she decided 2 things. The first is she said, I'm going to take the $5,000 I've saved and I am going to put it in the stock market. I'm going to invest in companies I know are going to be around in 25 years, so I'm going to invest in Pfizer because I know healthcare is going to grow. And I'm going to buy Chrysler because I watch millions of people buying cars, Pepsi, and on like that. That was her first resolve. Second, she decided she wasn't going to sell. She didn't want to pay taxes back to the Internal Revenue Service. So she left the money in there. She added little amounts along the way. And at her death, in 1995, 51 years later, Ann Scheiber's $5,000 plus a little extra was equal to $22 million, which she deeded to her favorite university. Now that's a great story. It's a living embodiment, Tom, of the power of compounded returns. And Ann Scheiber was not a Wall Street expert. She was a patient person. I hope like you, I wish like me.
She stuck with companies she had familiarity with, and she stayed with them for long periods of time.
And we believe that the best place in all of history to invest is, has been, and will be the U.S. stock market. Over the last century, the stock market has risen on average 11% a year. We think the same thing will be true of the next century. And so when we come back, we're going to start with most Americans' most beloved investment, Mutual funds. There are only a few funds that we actually like, and we're going to talk about those when we come back.
There's one, Dave, that we love, and it may be your ticket to financial independence. That's going to be the focus of our next segment. We'll talk about that and a lot more foolishness when we come back on the Motley Fool Money-Making, Life-Changing Special, Fool On.
And now, back to the Motley Fool Money-Making, Life-Changing Special.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome back. I'm David Gardner.
And I'm Tom Gardner. Let's move to the stock market,
Sure,
Dave.
Tom, you're out of debt. You're saving 5 to 10% of your salary. You know financial independence is priceless. Let's invest for that
We're
financial
all
independence.
feeling pretty good right now, Dave. So let's kick it off with Motley Fool Money-Making, Life-Changing point right up front. The stock market is the best place for your long-term investment, so let's use it.
Now, Tom, when you talk about the stock market and you're giving us these returns, I mean, how do you measure that?
Well, Dave, there's the Standard & Poor's 500 that most financial professionals refer to, the financial media does. Standard & Poor's is a company that tracks the stock market's returns, and it takes 500 of the largest companies in the U.S. and it aggregates them together, and the S&P 500 represents those 500 companies' average return from one year to the next. So you can look at that and see how the market's doing from one year to the next, and you can actually tie it to your own investments and see how you're doing against the average.
And Tom, we've got a chart here, I think, of some of the companies that make up the S&P 500. These are the 10 largest companies among 500 of the largest. As you can see, a lot of familiar names.
Pfizer, Cisco, Microsoft. Dave, what product does Pfizer make that most people know?
Viagra. Did I get that one right?
Good call. You nailed it. Merck, Intel, a lot of companies on the S&P 500 that we're familiar with as consumers. And so when you invest in these companies, you're investing in some of the biggest businesses in America and in the world. And that's the benchmark for the stock market that we're going to refer to a lot today.
Now, you said the market doubles every 6.5 years earlier, and we've heard that it's up 11% for every year on average. Does that include all the bad times? I mean, what about 1973-74? The S&P 500 declined 42% during that 2-year period. Does the returns that you give include that?
It does. That's the return, the S&P 500, since 1925. That includes the Great Depression. And those rates of return of 11% have been consistent over long periods of time. So again, the average rate of return over a 6.5-year period is you double your money.
Okay, so Motley Fool, money-making, life-changing point. Our next one is only invest in the stock market if you have 5 years or more to invest, because 1973-74 happens. And one day in 1987, the stock market dropped over 20%, just one day. There was a bad year last year, Tom. There are bad times in the stock market, but take it all in all, and that's why we believe taking the long view.
And we're actually not pulling 5 years out of a hat. We did a little research at the Motley Fool. We went back and took every 5-year period from 1900 to today. That's 1900 to 05, 01 to 06, 02 to 07, 03 to 08. And that's why we have summer interns at the Motley Fool to do that work for us. But if you look back, over 90% of those 5-year periods, you were better off being invested in the stock market than you were having your money in a savings account. And that makes it pretty shocking how much U.S. money is invested in savings accounts for long periods of time. In fact, 25% of all 401k money today is invested in money market funds, even though most of it will be there much longer than 5 years. So we think 5 years is a great period of time as a minimum for investors, and the average rate of return for 5 years on the stock market is 68%. So $10,000 invested today, on average, would be $16,800 in 5 years. I did the quick math for you.
That's wonderful, Tom. And you know, it's funny because most people are actually already in stocks, even when they don't realize it, through the most popular investment option of our time. And do you know what that is, Tom?
Dave, I see a lot of people buying timeshares today. Is that it?
No, guess again.
Okay. I'm going to say Franklin Mint Collectibles taken all together is the largest.
You can throw in those Civil War chess sets, too, and those still don't make it, Tom. Those aren't stocks either.
You know what? It's totally obvious to me. It's mutual funds.
You're right. Yes, you're right. Mutual funds. America loves its mutual funds. $150 billion invested in mutual funds in 1980. 21 years later, $4 trillion invested in mutual funds. Let's raise our hands today if we own any funds. And I see a lot of hands up. Now, keep your hands up if you know how many mutual funds you own. Someone down. Now, I don't want to actually embarrass anyone, Tom, but if I asked us all if we could define what a mutual fund is, I'm not sure all of us with our hands up could do that. Tom, instead I'd like you to define what a mutual
Dave,
fund is.
I'd like to call someone randomly out tonight and have them try and...
No, Tom, I insist you try.
Okay, I'll do it. Thousands of people pool their money together in a mutual fund and have a professional team manage it for them for an annual fee each year. How'd I do?
Not bad.
And Dave, we actually look at that mutual fund manager and assume he must know more than we do. He spends all day doing this. Thank heavens that that mutual fund manager is there to take care of me and do that hard work for me. Dave, it sounds so great. I'm just ready to buy. Just give me the checklist of my 401k. I'll take the aggressive growth.
Okay.
Give me the international
Hold on a
fund,
sec, Tom.
the bond fund. I want
Not
the gold
so
fund.
fast. 75% of all mutual funds disappoint their customers. And that's our next Motley Fool money-making, life-changing point. 75% of all mutual funds underperform the stock market's average return.
And Dave, that's been true for the last quarter century. The 25 years of the popularization of the mutual fund since the early 1970s, mutual funds have, on average, 3 out of 4 done worse than the stock market's average return. That's true over the last 20 years, the last 15, the last 10, the last 5.
And I'm sitting at home right now, Tom, and I'm wondering, how could that possibly be? These guys get paid a lot of money.
They've
A
got
lot of them have
beautiful desks.
MBAs. They've got a team working with them. They
They're
have
well
all the
dressed.
inside information,
They're smart.
don't they?
They've got MBAs. They should be able to do it. But the fact of the matter is, they've got an uphill battle. They actually have requirements from the Securities and Exchange Commission in Washington, D.C. that requires that they diversify their investments so that you and I aren't taking a big risk in investing in that mutual fund. The problem for the fund manager, which actually comes up to hurt you as the investor, is that by spreading that money across dozens of different companies, he's essentially duplicating the stock market's average return.
Okay.
He's owning industries and a variety of companies, and after getting that average rate of return, which is pretty darn good, we've talked about that, he or she takes the 2% fee out each year of the mutual fund. So you and I, investing in the average mutual fund today, are underperforming by about 2 percentage points a year. That may not sound like a lot, but if we're only getting 11% a year and you're taking 2% out each year, you can bet it's going to end up costing you a lot. In fact, a 21-year-old that gets her first job and puts $2,000 into a 401k plan each year, if she invests in the average rate of return of the stock market, just gets the B grade of the stock market, instead of buying that average mutual fund with 2 percentage points of fees each year, she will have $1 million more at her retirement because of that single choice in her 401k plan and the investments that go into it. So the cost of those fees are much greater than we think they are, and unfortunately most Americans today, those Americans that are investing $4 trillion into mutual funds, are not actually asking questions about the fees.
Tom, the cost of those fees is $35 billion. That's how much we all paid in mutual fund fees last year, and it's sad. It's kind of funny to think we paid that much to underperform the stock market, but it's also kind of sad because, Tom, as I noticed an airplane over here on our shelf.
I got nervous over here.
I think of this airplane, and the mutual fund industry has this airplane. We bought it for them, and they use it to fly around and pitch their fund to other people. So we're paying for the planes, and we're paying for the ads. In fact, I think we should play a typical mutual fund ad, Tom, right now.
With 5-year annual returns of 13.5%, the Blunderman Value Fund has been a shining beacon in a vast sea of financial uncertainty. Don't let your family's future crash upon the sharp rocks of volatility, leaving your loved ones drowning in a whirlpool of debt. Instead, choose the security of Blunderman.
Yeah, Dave, that's the typical mutual fund ad. We've probably seen it during the Super Bowl or in magazines. We've heard it on the radio. And those mutual funds are often trying to scare us into accepting their professional management, which unfortunately, on average, costs too much. Now, we've got a little Motley Fool magic here in our pocket. We've got a truth serum, and if we gave it to that mutual fund company, the Blunderman Value Fund, and we required that they tell the entire truth, nothing but the truth in their ad, it might sound something like this.
With annual returns of 13.5%, the Blunderman Value Fund easily lost to the market's average over the last 5 years. But were you also aware of all the big fees in the Blunderman Fund? Fees that pay for unnecessary trades, fees that compensate our professionals for repeatedly losing to the market, and fees that cover the cost of the very ad you're watching right now. So, if you want worse than average returns and want to pay more for the privilege, choose the security of Blunderman.
And that might all sound kind of bad, but it gets even worse. Because I've got a bad word for you, and I'm going to say it right now on PBS. You know what it is, Tom?
I'm going to guess that on PBS, Dave, it's...
Well, anyway, that's not it. The bad word is actually beep. It's not that bad a word. I can say it on PBS. Let me try again. The bad word is actually taxes. Because the average mutual fund manager last year traded out of 3 out of 4 stocks that he or she held in that fund. Now, guess who pays those capital gains taxes at the end of the year for that hyperactive day trading fund manager? We do. Let's say it together. 1, 2, 3. We do. That's right.
And that's no fun for investors. And Dave, I've got a little quiz for you. It's going to be my only one of the night, so
Okay.
get ready.
Yep.
Okay. Vanguard has done a study. Vanguard offers the index fund, which we're going to talk about in a second. And Vanguard has done a study that shows that the average managed mutual fund over the last 20 years, their stated returns, how much of those stated returns are you actually getting after taxes? That's my quiz.
Okay. I'm going to guess about half.
You're right, Dave. Unfortunately, you nailed it. You're
well-
getting half of the returns, the stated returns over the last 20 years.
And that's why Motley Fool money-making, life-changing point, the next one is follow the tax-adjusted rate return of your mutual funds. It's the only one that really matters to you and me, our returns after taxes.
Dave, that's easy to say, but I'm sitting at home and I have no idea how to follow the tax-adjusted returns of my funds.
Okay, there are three basic ways. The first is you can call the broker who sold it to you. That person's working for you. Ask that person. Another option, call the fund family itself. You can also check online today. There are a lot of online sites with this information. Morningstar.com, also at funds.fool.com, our site. You can check the after-tax returns of your mutual funds.
So we're asking ourselves, there's got to be a better alternative to buying underperforming mutual funds and holding them year in and year out and paying a whole bunch in taxes. And Dave, I know you're here for me. I know you've got the idea. You're going to pull us out of the pain. Don't you have a solution for us?
Tom, the Motley Fool money-making, life-changing special is not about problems. It's about solutions. So yes, let's introduce our solution, and it is very simply the index fund. Tom, do you know what an index fund is?
Dave, I'm going to guess that it's a fund that indexes.
That's brilliant, Tom.
Okay, so here's what happens with an index fund. The index fund buys, in the case of a total stock market index fund, 5,000 different companies in the U.S. It's automated. There's no management team. They're not getting $200,000 a year salaries to try and analyze the hot sector for the next 6 months. There's total diversification. In the total stock market index fund, you're getting 5,000 companies. In the S&P 500 index fund, you're getting 500 of the largest businesses in America. And what you're getting for that are returns that are the B average of the stock market. In the financial world, when we make our investments, it is true that being average is well above average today. If you have just a discount brokerage account, an index fund, and you keep socking money into that index year in and year out, you're also going to be treated to one other thing. Because they're buying the index, they're not trading. You're not getting high turnover ratios and taxes each year. And when the SEC does, and they will require mutual funds to state tax-adjusted returns, people are going to be horrified by the value they've been missing out on by not just getting the B average of the stock market. So take a look at this chart, Dave. Let's look at some returns at your average or at a managed fund that has gotten an 11% rate of return, the stock market's average over the last century, and takes a 2% fee out per year. And compare that to an index fund. The average index fund fee for a total market index fund at Vanguard or the S&P 500 is just 0.2%. Again, they're not paying big staff salaries so that their staff can go on safari. They're actually holding costs down, and they're actually charging something like 1/6 on average per year what a managed mutual fund is. So there are the returns. You end up making more than $75,000 over a 20-year period by being invested in an index fund.
And that's just fees.
The lessons are pretty clear, and we encourage you to do your own research about index funds and to learn your own lessons. But I think if you look at the numbers, you're going to find it's a great alternative for a lot of investors. It's a great starting point and ending point for most investors in the U.S. today. But a lot of people don't exactly know how to buy them.
Yeah, how would somebody buy an index fund,
Well,
Tom?
Dave, I've got a chart for you right here. A lot of us have financial planners or brokers, and I encourage you to ask that planner or that broker about the index fund. And you know what? You'll learn a lot about that advisor based on their response. If they don't like it, well, part of the reason is they're probably not getting paid a lot to sell it to you. So that may be a sign that you're working with someone you shouldn't be working with, but definitely take it to your planner or broker. You can also get a discount broker, either a broker online, or there are a lot of discount brokers offline. Talk to friends about the discount broker that they use. You can go to Gomez.com where they rate discount brokers. You can come to broker.fool.com, or you can read financial magazines today that periodically do reviews of different discount brokers. What's attractive to us about discount brokers is that on average you're paying somewhere around $15 per transaction. And this is in a world where you can pay $100, $200, or $300 to a broker at a big investment bank in New York for each transaction. So that holds costs down. And again, that index fund, that's a great opportunity for a lot of investors to get started and get finished investing. Now, Dave, a lot of people who are already invested in mutual funds that may not be doing well when they look down at them may be asking themselves, well, should I move my money over to an index fund today, or should I stick with the funds I have and start up with an index fund?
Great question. It's a question many people do have, and that introduces the next Motley Fool money-making, life-changing point, which is that if you have less than 10 years in the time that you'll need that money, hold on. Stick with the Blunderman value funds of the world, because the tax bite you'll be paying is not worth changing over to something better like the index fund. Now, if on the other hand you have more than 10 years to keep that money invested, We think it makes a lot of sense in most situations, and you have to run the numbers yourself, but in most situations it makes a lot of sense to sell out of your underperforming mutual funds and put it in an index fund.
But you know what? For us, it isn't the ending point as investors. We love to get a better grade than B. And if you just get 1 percentage point more per year than an index fund, the amounts of money you'll accumulate over your life are really dramatic. When we come back, we're actually going to move beyond the index fund. We're going to take that power of the index fund as our safety net. That's the B return you can always get. But we're going to start thinking as Ann Scheiber did. We're going to start buying some stocks, looking at companies and evaluating to try and find the best businesses in America, the businesses that are B+ or A- or A businesses. I promise they're out there. In fact, many of them are right under your nose. Thanks for staying with us on the Motley Fool Money Making Life Changing Special.
Fool on.
Fool on.
Funding for the Motley Fool Money Making Life Changing Special was made possible by
EMC Corporation, committed to leading the way in building the information infrastructure for a connected world. EMC, where information lives.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Motley Fool Money Making Life Changing Special. It's time to talk about investing in the stock market directly in American businesses. And we're really excited to be here talking to we're supposed to both be out here. I don't know if Dave is here. Is Dave anywhere on the premises?
Tom, I'm out here. I'm the average guy. You're talking about the stock market. I don't feel part of it. It takes too much money. You guys know too much. I'm not part of this.
Dave, I can convince you. I think you can invest in the stock market. You know, everyone in America can. You know, there are a lot of people in the U.S. today that think they have to have $50,000 to start investing. But we're going to talk about ways to get started investing with as little as $15 a month.
I
so
just
Dave,
feel like I'm on the outside.
I want you to come back in here and help me, and I want some encouragement. Dave can invest. He can invest. Come on now. That was a cheap way to get another round of applause. No, we need to encourage each other to actually get started investing. And Dave, that's why Motley Fool Money Making Life Changing point number 1 of this segment is everyone in America should own at least one stock. There are a lot of great companies out there available to us, and we're going to try and beat that index fund with them. There are businesses right in front of our eyes that have been doing so for 10, 15, 20, 40 years, and we got to research them and get started investing.
And Tom, a lot of people think there's some special sauce. You have to have insider info or a hot tip or something no one's heard of to get involved in the stock market. But we put together a chart here of some great hot stocks. Do you recognize any of these hot stocks, Tom?
Yeah, Dave, we're having a little fun with the word hot in that case because you know what? These are companies that have been around. They're old faithfuls. Walmart and General Electric and Coca-Cola and Ford. Most of these businesses we're familiar with as consumers. So often it's the obviously great companies out there that make for the best investments. And unfortunately, a lot of people when they get started investing think, I have to find something obscure, something no one's ever heard of, when in fact, look at Walmart's returns. 32% a year for the last 20 years. Sara Lee, 22% a year. And there are a lot of other great companies besides these. These companies are great places for your investment. And there's some great stocks for us to look at this hour.
They are great stocks, Tom, but you don't have to find the greatest stocks. I mean, each of those is way ahead of the market. I've got another chart here, Tom. Let's look at how good stocks can help you do better. You see the top line, we can all get that line. That's the index fund, 11% a year. Now, if you could do 2 percentage points or 4 percentage points better than that over the course of 10 or 20 years, that's how much money you'd have. So think about that. If you could find a stock that returns 15%, we just saw a whole bunch that did 19 to 32. But if you could find one that did 15% a year over 20 years, you'd have more than twice as much money than if you just invested in the index fund.
And Dave, those are the sorts of companies we're going to look for now. We have a couple criteria, but I want to make sure before we get to them that everyone here understands it's never too late nor too early to start investing. So let's make our first investment and look at our foolish principles that we're going to talk about. And we do have one commitment that we want you to make, and that is to be invested in a company for 5 years or more, to actually look at yourself as a part owner, as a partner of that business, rather than as a paper trader of the stock, using your online discount broker or your broker or investing in a mutual fund that may be flipping shares quite frequently. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is investing for the long haul and being an owner of that business.
Tom, I hear you, and yet I'm at home right now, and I haven't invested in the stock market ever before, and I'm wondering, how much should I put in that first stock? And I'll answer my own question. If you're just dipping your toe in the water for the first time as a new investor, I think it makes a lot of sense to do so incrementally with a little bit up front. So let's say 10%. Leave 90% in the index fund, as we've been discussing, and let's put 10% in that first investment. That means if you have $5,000 saved today, I think 500 of it deserves to be in a stock. And of course, your goal is to beat the index fund, to beat the rate of return you're getting on your other money. So Tom, shall we get into our checklist
Dave,
now?
I'm really fired up. And as I get excited, I always like to go back to my section. You know, to the nest eggers, to the bald guys back there that are working with us. It's great to see you guys. You guys are beautiful. You guys think we can beat the market? Can we beat the market? Yeah, you're darn right we can. Yeah, here we go.
Okay, good. Checklist item number 1 then. Invest in companies you know and love. Now that means you're investing in your hobby or the industry that you work in, something you know really well. You're playing on your home field within your own circle of competence. Now I think back over the 1990s, and I've used computers and enjoyed using computers for a while, and I've invested for a while, and I think back to the experience I would have on a regular basis. I would flip on my Dell computer. Up comes Microsoft Windows. I'd flash over to my Schwab account, check how I'm doing. I would track my expenses and my investments using Quicken, made by Intuit, the software company. All good companies, Tom. They've all beaten the market.
And Dave, you're proud to say tonight, I'm sure, that you invested in all 4 of those companies and made a tremendous amount of money over the last 10 years.
Tom, if I had, I wouldn't be singing for my supper right here.
So you invested in 3 of them. 2, you didn't invest in a single one of those companies. You saw them for 10 years on your PC. You should be ashamed of yourself. Walk out of the studio right now. You don't belong up here on stage.
No, I have never personally owned any of those companies. How could I miss them? How did any of us miss them, really? Or how did any of us miss Sara Lee or any of these great companies that provide products and services that we enjoy, that we know, and that we love? So checklist item number 1, invest in companies that you know and love.
And checklist number 2 is to simply look around you and say, I love this company, its products and services are great, but is it truly a leader in its industry? Dave, I've got a chart that I'd like to look at.
Okay.
And actually take a look at what happens when you invest in the leader over number 2. Because that's what's happening in a free market system. The best get better. And the number 1 begins to run up a lead on number 2 that is dramatic over any extended period of time. Let's start with Walmart and Kmart, because that's pretty shocking. $5,000 invested in Walmart 20 years ago is worth more than $1 million today. $5,000 invested in Kmart 20 years ago is worth $4,000 today. That's what happens. Kmart is arguably not number 2 in the business, but we need to look for that leader. And I'm only going to ask you to be intuitive about that. If you know and love the product and service, you should be able to gain some knowledge by reading and by studying those companies in that industry. You should be able to gain some knowledge about whether or not Coca-Cola is number 1 over Pepsi, because the difference in returns has been pretty dramatic there as well over the last 20 years. And the final one is Microsoft versus Apple. As they fought for the software crown in the PC industry, you actually knew pretty early on. You certainly knew by 1990 that Microsoft was picking up market share in 1990. Whether or not you loved their products, you actually knew that company was beginning to dominate the PC, and $5,000 invested in Microsoft 10 years ago is worth $100,000 today, while it's actually down in Apple. So you have to look for that leader. You have to ask yourself, is this company truly the dominant force in this marketplace? If I love their products and services, I still need them to be number 1.
And let me introduce number 3 then. Tom, we really think that if you're going to make your first investment in a company, number 3, it should have profits growing by 10% or more. Now that means, first of all, please notice that they have profits. For your first stock market investment, I think it makes a lot of sense to invest in a company that is profitable. You also need to know how the company makes money. Let me give a typical company that many of us know, McDonald's. How do they make money? Well, just like you'd think. They make it off the food that they sell all over the place. They mainly make their money off of French fries and Coke. Those are their 2 high-margin items, so that's McDonald's. Pretty straightforward. Invest in companies whose money you understand, how they make it, and make sure those profits are growing 10% or more a year.
Dave, our 4th attribute that we look for when investigating a company is whether or not that company has more cash than debt. It's a lot like personal finance for us. If you were to invest in a friend of yours, or maybe your brother, you'd want to see that they didn't have a tremendous amount of debt, and your investment was just going to go toward their paying down a little bit of that debt. Or maybe they were addicted to borrowing money. That's not the sort of company that we want you to invest in, and unfortunately, a lot of companies out there do an awful lot of borrowing.
How about a couple of examples?
Microsoft and Disney. Now, Microsoft, if you look at their balance sheet today, has more than $20 billion of cash and no debt, not a dollar of debt. Disney, on the other hand, because it purchased Capital Cities ABC and ESPN has more than $9 billion of debt and very little cash to go along with that. Now, the problem is not that Disney is going out of business, because Disney's a profitable company with a lot of brands that we know and love, and Mickey Mouse does not have an agent. So there are a lot of great things about that Disney brand and Disney business, but one thing that we don't like is how much money they've borrowed over the last couple of years to expand. And the reason we don't like it is if there's a new innovation in their marketplace, they may be caught paying interest on their loan rather than investing in the future of broadband, for example. So Dave, let's take a look at a chart here of Microsoft versus Disney with our 4 criteria, and you'll see, do you love the company? Now, maybe some of you have a frowny face next to Microsoft because you might not like their products and services. I happen to love Microsoft. An industry leader. Both Microsoft and Disney are industry leaders without question. Now, Disney is not making 10% more this year than they did last year, and Disney has a lot more debt than they do cash. Things can change in the marketplace. 5 years from now, Disney might make for a great investment. But today, looking at our 4 attributes, this wouldn't be the first investment we made in the stock market. This is a lifelong endeavor investing in stocks, and you can build off this initial checklist.
Right, so each of us is going to develop our own approach over time, but let's recap that checklist right now. Our checklist for making your first investment. Take a look at this chart. Again, invest in companies you know and love. Invest in industry leaders. Look for those profits that are growing 10% a year. And finally, look for more cash than debt. We apply the same thing to companies that we would apply to individuals.
Now, Dave, I've felt so much love in the room as we've gone through these criteria. So many smiles, so many good feelings, so much positive energy. I feel like I'm in a Tony Robbins video right now as we go through those attributes. But we need to warn people as well. It's not all sugar and love out in the stock market. You can make mistakes. We have made mistakes as well. We've got 4 foolish don'ts, 4 things that we don't think you should do as you invest today and for your future.
Can I do the first one?
Dave, I'd like you to, because I know the story that's coming, and I know it comes at your expense. I know it's a reflection on a bad investment that you made, and actually my agent actually advised me to go sit down on the couch and not be associated with you up front. So I'll be back here during the story.
Okay, and I'll be happy to tell this. The first point, the first foolish don't for all investors is don't buy obscure companies that are second and third tier players in industries you don't really know much about. I did learn this the hard way. It was about 10 years ago, and I made an investment based on the numbers at the time in an oil company. Now, I, to this day, really have no business investing in an oil company. I wouldn't know what an oil field looked like if I'd just been told I walked over one. And yet I made this investment in an oil company in Alberta, Canada, and I would call them up, because once I'd made the investment, I then tried to get educated about it. I reversed the process, call them up and say, guys, did we strike it rich today? And I was grasping, and they would pass me through to the chief financial officer of the company because I was so persistent. And every few weeks I'd call back with my checklist of questions again until I finally realized what is probably its own money-making, life-changing lesson here. If you can get the chief financial officer of any company that you're invested in on the phone on a regular basis, sell that stock.
Foolish don't number 2 is a simple one. It's a real temptation for new investors to get out there and buy a stock that allows them to own a tremendous number of shares. And those are stocks that trade under $5 a share, and those are penny stocks. Now, those can be really tempting because if you have $2,000 to invest, why would you buy a company trading at $200 a share? That has to be an expensive company, and you could only buy 10 shares. There's nothing exciting about that. Whereas, if you can buy a 50-cent stock, you can own 4,000 shares, which is truly exciting stuff.
Tommy, you're selling it pretty hard, but I think the point is the shares don't really matter, right?
Well, that's true. I mean, if I offered you right now 2,000 shares of a 50-cent stock or 10 shares of Berkshire Hathaway, which would you take? You only get 10 shares. You only get 10 shares.
Since Berkshire Hathaway is Warren Buffett's company, and he's the greatest investor of our time, and I think their stock is priced somewhere over $20,000.
It's actually about $50,000.
Yeah, I think I'd probably take Berkshire Hathaway.
Well, you'd be right to do so. The share price doesn't matter. In fact, the only time it really matters to us as investors is if it's below $5 a stub, because it got there for a reason. The business is falling apart. They may have a great marketing department. They may have a cure for cancer. They have wonderful creative writers.
It's always a great story.
Working at a lot of penny stocks out there, but the fact of the matter is 75% of all companies trading under $5 a share right now will be bankrupt in the next 10 years. That's not investing, that's speculating. So don't buy low-price shares. Don't buy penny stocks, as tempting as it may be. that's not going to be a company that's going to be around probably for you 10 years from now.
Okay, and foolish don't, number 3. Another thing we don't want you to do. Don't use the buy low, sell high mentality. Don't adopt it. They're 4 of the most harmful words that we hear, and it's a cliche these days, right? Hey, I know how to beat the stock market. The trick is just buy low, sell high. In most cases, you're buying damaged goods. You might be buying something that's going out of favor permanently. On the other hand, think about a stock that's gone from 12 to 40. Now, a lot of people shy away from that situation. I missed it. I'd be buying high at this point. I'd be an idiot. But the truth is, ask yourself this. How does any stock rise over time? All the great stocks we've been talking about, they made constant new highs over time. So if you think buy low, you're going to miss most of the best investments available to us as investors today. And it's true yesterday, and it'll be true tomorrow. So foolish don't number 3, avoid the buy low, sell high mentality.
Dave, let's recap our 3 foolish don'ts. Don't buy obscure companies that aren't leaders. Don't invest in companies that are trading under $5 a share. And Dave, don't have a mentality of buying low and selling high. Those are our 3 foolish don'ts.
Now let's talk about a question that every investor has, which is when to sell. Sell when the criteria you chose for the stock in the first place, the reasons that you bought, no longer apply. I think it behooves you to sit down with a single sheet of paper and write down in a few paragraphs why you bought the stock. Then you can hold on to that sheet of paper or that document on your computer and check back with it. And see, after the stock has done very well, or after it's done poorly, you can see whether those reasons still apply. And Tom, a second Motley Fool sell rule we use is sell when you find a better place to put the money. Now that may sound just like common sense, but you know what? Common sense often isn't that common. A good reason that you might sell a stock, for example, would be if you find something better to invest in. If you think about it, most of the best reasons to sell match the reasons you invested in the first place. You bought something that you loved and you no longer love it. Or you bought something you loved and it did really well and now it's time to sell it because that's why you invested in the first place. So Tom, those are our Motley Fool sell rules.
And let me make a promise to everyone here, and that is you will make some mistakes selling stocks. We have certainly made mistakes. I remember back in 1994 when I was so happily invested in Cisco and Dell. They were great companies. The technology market went through a downturn in the summer. And I looked at Cisco and Dell, and they were both up 25%, and I said to myself, I'm going to take my profits now. That was 6 years ago. If I had remained invested in those companies, I would not be here tonight. We're going to make selling mistakes at different points along the way, but we're going to learn from them. And I think one lesson that I've taken as an investor is to really hold on to your winners. The biggest mistakes we make in selling stocks are selling the great companies because they look overvalued temporarily or because they have one bad quarter. Now, we try to teach this lesson in an unusual way on our Valentine's Day radio show last year. We were trying to compare in every way possible the decisions that we make in our investment portfolio and the decisions that we make in our romantic life. It goes something like this. Susie and I have been dating for about a year. We're having a great time together. We weren't expecting this to happen, but we've frankly fallen in love, and I can't believe it. We're talking about getting married now. Things are going so well, much better than I ever expected. This stock is going through the roof. I got to get out of this.
Tom, that actually has been your strategy.
I hope you feel good about yourself.
Hey, a lot of people were clapping along with me.
I hope you all feel good about yourself. Now, in stock market investing and in our personal lives, it makes a tremendous amount of sense to us to hold on to our winners in life, and that's perhaps the last point we'll make that's a money-making, life-changing point, and that is hold on to your winners. It's such a great practice. You may find that you invest in a company that does really well and fails after 4 years, and you lost out on that one. But if you find 1 or 2 or 3, or again, even just one, Walmart or General Electric or Johnson & Johnson, and you hold that for 25 years, you will be so phenomenally rewarded by that investment. And I imagine, although I don't really know, that the same is true in your personal life as well. But that, Dave, that's Fools Are From Mars, Fools Are From Venus, which is coming in June.
We'll do that next time. Okay, if you take one thing away from our talk about the stock market and making your first investment, take this story with you. In fact, I want to put my hat on. I think we should put our hats on to close because I think this story deserves it.
So I'm going to put the hat on if that's okay, guys. Back there, okay. Yeah. Got to check in with the nest eggers before I put my hat on. You know, you don't see bald guys on television enough in this country, and I hope we see more of them.
Tom, This is a story of a guy who came to a bar right next to our global headquarters, Fool HQ in Alexandria, Virginia. And he walked in dressed head to foot in leather. You can see what kind of bars we go to. He was 6'5". He was middle-aged. We got to talking with him. Turns out he was a Harley-Davidson guy. He'd ridden in on his Harley, surrounded by a lot of guys who were riding Harleys. They were making their annual ride on the Capitol. And they stopped by our watering house, and we got to talk with him. He said, "What do you guys do?" We said, "Well, stock market. We teach people about money, trying to get them to make better financial decisions." He said, "Stock market. Let me tell you about the stock market." He said, "I've only ever made one investment. The year was 1988. I heard it was a good time to get in. The market had crashed the year before. I had $5,000 saved at the time. I gave it to a broker. He put me in a stock that was at $5 a share, so I had 1,000 shares, and I still follow that today. They make breakfast in the Southeast restaurants or something, and it's gone from $5 a share to 25 cents a share. And so what I've learned, guys, watching my $5,000 go to $250 is that the stock market is a great big gambling machine." Well, Tom turned to this Harley guy, and I think Tom had the right line. He said, "Did you ever think of buying Harley?" He hit Tom square in the face. Just kidding. No, did you think of buying Harley? He said it hadn't occurred to him. And think about it. Here's a guy who was riding Harley, surrounded by other people riding Harleys, and yet when it came to investing his life savings at the point, he gave it to somebody he didn't know, who put him in something he didn't understand and had no connection with. And we went back and we checked the numbers. Harley-Davidson, since 1988, is up over 100 times in value. So that means his $5,000, which is today $250, would be over $500,000 if he'd bought what he knew, if he'd bought what he loved, if he'd bought what in many ways he was. The Harley-Davidson story is one for all time because it's about buying what you know and buying what you love, and your investments should express who you are.
Dave, we've told a lot of stories about people that we've met along the way over the last 6 years. We've had a tremendous amount of fun. And tonight we've talked a lot about people who have had miraculous changes in their financial lives. For us, money is opportunity. It represents a tool that allows us to create security underneath and allows us to pursue our opportunities. Whether those opportunities are leaving your job and doing something else, or taking a vacation, traveling around the world, or just giving that money away to charity, we think that all of us should take a more active role in the decisions that we make about our money. We were very fortunate. We're here to tell you tonight that we were extremely fortunate. We had a father who sat us down as kids and said, "You know what? You can do this. You can figure out how to invest this money, and most importantly, you can have a tremendous amount of fun doing it." And we had a mother who said, "Guys, just remember, money actually isn't everything." So that perspective is a lesson that I hope we all take home with us. I hope you share that lesson with your kids and your grandkids, and I hope you live that lesson as well. We've enjoyed this. Thanks for being with us through it all. Together now, Fool on.
Fool on. Thank you.
Thank you.